and particularly among such imminent gathering, to be able to present what has been a very open, transparent, and collaborative process in terms of developing the National Action Plan in collaboration and coordination with different partners, where the government has actually opened up and allowed the civil society as well as development partners to be an equal stakeholder right from the initial stage of planning, drafting, consultations, processing, and perhaps we look forward to a very collaborative, continued collaboration in the implementation as well. I would like to go back to a little bit of background about Nepal. As you are aware, Nepal went through a 10-year-long armed conflict from 1996 to 2006. And the key agenda, even during those 10 years, for women's groups, women's organizations, women's networks, and community-based groups and community women had been peace. And I think it was in different levels that women had been working in generating peace, whether it be at the central level or whether it be at the community level. They had actually opened up places, spaces where they could look after the women who had been injured during the armed conflict. And of course, we shouldn't forget that 40% of the then rebels' force was also comprised of women. So women have been in the forefront of battlegrounds, and women have been institutionalizing themselves and advocating for peace. So women were active change agents and active players in the entire process. However, it was in 2003 that a special network, particularly to work on peace, was established from civil society organizations called Shanti Malika, which had a special agenda to advocate for peace. And in 2005, a national 3-day conference was organized, which came up with a 10-point agenda. And on the basis of that, different political parties were advocated to stop conflict and go ahead with peace. Then it was later, of course, we had other networks, which are a special one called WAPCA, which also works on peace, democracy, and constituent assembly. And then we had the Women's Security Pressure Group as well. So there were all these organizations advocating for peace. But I think the knowledge of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 was very low, not only amongst policymakers, but also amongst women's organizations. And it was only in 2006, when the actual armed conflict ended, that we started using this Security Council resolution to advocate for women's participation in the mechanisms and the processes that were developed after the armed conflict ended. But needless to say, we all know that women's participation in all the processes that were developed and established after the armed conflict has been very, very low. So it was in that region that we felt that 1325 played a very important role in strengthening our advocacy. And in 2007, as the Joint Secretary said, the Special Ministry of Peace and Reconstruction was established, which was the lead ministry to develop and establish peace mechanisms in the country. And civil society also collaborated with the ministry in trying to chart a way forward for peace. And it was UN Women who partnered with the ministry, particularly doing awareness raising, advocacy, and also training. It was UNFPA who also came up with a special media kit, training for journalists, and there were other organizations also working with civil society as well as the ministry in making people more aware or strengthening accountability towards 1325. However, we felt that a specific agenda, a specific direction to take the peace agenda forward was very much required, and one of the most important thing that was in hand with us was the 1325 agenda, where the Secretary General had called upon every country to actually develop a national action plan. And the talks or the consultations for developing the National Action Plan had started, and in 2009, a special high-level steering committee to implement the 1325 National Action Plan was constituted. And the the happiest thing for the civil society was, out of the 25 members in the high-level steering committee, 10 of them are civil society representations or civil society networks and organizations, which is a little higher than the 33% which we usually talk about. In the process, the Joint Secretary already mentioned all the process that we adopted in developing the National Action Plan, but you can pick up the information brochure that we have behind here, which actually describes all the process that has been adopted. And what I have I said, the civil society, the three collaborations between the government, development partners, and the civil society was very important in this entire process. The PSWG, which is called the Peace Support Working Group, which is a consortium of UN organizations and multilateral and bilateral organizations, they were there as partners over there. And then the consultations that took place in different districts. The Joint Secretary mentioned that Nepal has 75 districts. Out of 75 districts, in a span of 3 months, we organized 52 consultations, covering more than, almost 75% of the country's geographical topography. But the most important part of these consultations were that it was participated by conflict, and they got an opportunity to present their suggestions, to look at the draft National Action Plan framework and present their suggestions and present their concerns. We collected around 1,500 action points, and out of the 1,500, we tried to prioritize that and put it, prioritize it and put it under the different 5 pillars. I would just like to mention some of the key concerns of particularly women and girls directly affected by conflict here. In terms of participation, the concern was that in all the talk teams and in the negotiations and in all the mechanisms that was developed after the armed conflict, women's participation was very negligible. Women had not been included in the planning and drafting of these plans, and also whatever task forces and commissions were established, women's participation was very low. However, I have to mention here that local peace committees have been formed in more than 70 districts, almost all the districts of Nepal, and it has been mandatory that 33% women's participation are in these local peace committees. So that has been a positive trend ahead. But women were also concerned, and one of the things that women didn't want to, and here I'm talking about the community women didn't want to compromise on, was when they came to participation, they didn't even stop at 33%, but they said proportionate participation. And they just didn't want to compromise on that part. So we have that in the National Action Plan also, that women want proportionate participation in all and at all levels of peace process and conflict transformation. So these were some of the concerns. In terms of prevention and protection, the continued impunity was a major concern. Lack of access to legal counseling services was a major concern. Emergency support was a major concern. So these were some of the things that, and also the lack of conducive environment in the security sector, not having a conducive environment to hear about gender-based violence or sexual violence. So that was also a major concern. So these are some of the concerns which have been reflected in the National Action Plan as well. In terms of promotion, higher level or wider level of capacity building, awareness and mainstreaming, and a special media and communication strategy to see that this is understood was also spelled out. The most important pillar for women's organizations, or women who we consulted at the community level and girls who we consulted at the community level, was relief and recovery. That was considered the most important pillar, and I think the highest level of discussion took place under that pillar. And in that, they actually were concerned that the actual identification of real victims was not taking place. There were people who were coming up not as actual victims, but were getting relief and recovery. That was a major concern. The other was politicization in the distribution of relief and recovery programs was another problem. And the other was, it should not be limited to cash compensation alone, but it should also, any relief programs should be designed on the basis of what the imminent required needs are. And employment and education for those affected was also a major concern that was presented. And the other part was having an emergency fund for addressing immediate needs of women during conflict and after conflict. So the National Action Plan also consists of a point where we have the establishment of a special emergency fund as well. Monitoring and evaluation and resource mobilization, which was the 5th pillar. Here, the women were more concerned that women from the central as well as the community level needs to be involved in the monitoring and evaluation process right from the beginning, and in all development processes as well. And I think one of the most important things that the civil society felt about the monitoring and evaluation process was also that now that we have this National Action Plan, and the National Action Plan has, as stated by the Joint Secretary, indicators as well. I think these indicators are going to help the civil society to actually streamline their own programs and activities to see that how it can contribute to the bigger goal of the National Action Plan. So this is one of the very added benefits of having this National Action Plan as well. And the indicators, on the basis of the indicators, the civil society have committed to come up with an NGO report every year, also to see where we are and see the gaps and how we can make amendments or strengthen in the second year and the third year. So that's one of the commitments from the civil society as well. I know my time is already up, so having said that, I would like to say that the civil society looks forward to continued collaboration of all these three partners, the government, different development, external development partners, as well as the civil society in the implementation as well. And we want everyone to know that civil society is there to support this implementation. And at the same time, we would also like to learn from the civil society of other countries who already have a national action plan and who are in the process of implementation. Which carries out great hope for the women and men of Nepal. And in the search of best practices, I really encourage you to look, as also have been mentioned here several times, to look to the inclusive process that has characterized the development of this action plan. I'm very impressed to learn about the strong collaboration between the government, the line ministries, civil society and development partners. Also women's networks and the child rights consortium have also been mobilized to make sure that all the voices that needed to be heard were included. I must also say that I'm very proud that Norway has been involved in such a positive process, as we were, as you mentioned, the chair of the Peace Support Working Group in Nepal. This working group has ensured that the support from the international community has been provided in a coordinated and collaborative way. This group has been able to respond to requests from the government in a collective manner by drawing on different resources, both technical and financial. I would like to commend the strong leadership of the government and in particular the Ministry of Peace and Reconstruction, which has been the driving force throughout this process. And I had the pleasure of visiting Nepal in October last year when the high-level steering committee approved the action plan. So I've been an eager follower of this process, and I'm also very happy to take part in this event today. It is a strong priority for the Norwegian government to promote the participation and roles of women in conflict management, in peace processes and in peace building. Our support for the implementation of Security Council resolutions 1325 and 1820 on women, peace and security. These are part of our goals to promote both gender equality and international peace and security. And we believe that these are closely linked. We are convinced that increasing women's participation strengthens our ability to prevent and to manage and resolve contemporary conflicts, and not least to rebuild societies after conflicts have ended. Norway recently launched our own updated action plan, a new strategic plan on women, peace and security for the next 3 years. This plan includes concrete measures to increase women's participation and influence in peace building and in peace negotiations. I have it with me here. This is in Norwegian, but as I reckon most of you don't read Norwegian, we also have it available in English, and I'm sure we can make it available for those of you who want to take a peek into our own action plan. Women are often referred to as victims of war, in wars, but because women are the backbone of social relations in most societies and serve an especially important role in a situation of conflict, they also have an important political role to play. And they should be recognized as actors and agents of peace and not just recipients of peace dividends. Throughout history, women have played crucial roles in conflict management, conflict resolution and peace building. Women do vital work on the ground in conflict areas. They become the sole breadwinner as heads of households, they protect children, they give support to victims, and they mediate between groups and reconcile communities. However, women are seldom present at high-level peace negotiations. Not only is this unfair, it is unwise. An increasing amount of evidence shows that involving women in peace processes brings a more inclusive view of security and strengthens the likelihood that agreements and peace will prevail. If you take into consideration women's perspectives in the peace talks and drafting of peace agreements, it will not only assure a broader participation or reflect a symbolic act of inclusiveness, it will also bring important ownership and legitimacy to the process. Peace agreements that do not have the full acceptance from women are not likely to respond adequately to core issues of the conflict and their impact on society, and they may therefore fail. Women must also play an active part in post-conflict situations in order to achieve stability and sustainable peace. This includes securing women's positions in political processes and applying a gender perspective in national policy development. The needs and priorities of women in post-conflict situations tend to include security, health, education, property rights, and employment claims that are vital for their economic independence. And moreover, women must be ensured the dignity and justice they deserve to be able to carry on with their lives. To conclude, I hope that one day action plans on women, peace and security will not be necessary. I hope that women's experiences and interests in armed conflict are natural parts of any country's peace and security policies. Why should they not be? But until we reach that day, we must use all available tools to strengthen women's active and meaningful participation. That means participation that has the power to make a positive change. The process of developing national action plans and securing the commitment of governments is a big step in the right direction. National action plans are important signs of political will, and the process of dialogue and consultation can have a lasting effect on the society. So we count on the Nepal's government to sustain that political will and to live up to the high standards that you now have set for yourselves. And Norway, we will continue to partner with Nepal and support the implementation of this action plan. And now that it has been launched, the real work starts.
Now I would like to call upon Ms. Purnima Mane, Deputy Executive Director of the UNFPA, another very important pillar in terms of promoting this National Action Plan and in terms of lending support for the peace process in Nepal, has been the UNFPA as a co-chair of the Peace Support Working Group on this UNSCR 1325 and 1822. I have the honor, therefore, to give the floor to Madam Purnima Mane.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, civil society organization representatives, United Nations colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be very brief because I realize that you probably want to ask a few questions and you need a little more time, so I'm going to keep this very short. First of all, it's a privilege to make a few remarks on behalf of UNFPA. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate Nepal on this momentous occasion, because I think it signifies the recognition of the government's commitment to women, peace and security issues. UNFPA, both at headquarters and at the country level, has supported the government and civil society of Nepal throughout the development of the National Action Plan, both technically and financially. But as co-chair, together with Norway, in the Peace Support Working Group in Nepal, we have been an active partner in the peace and reconciliation process in the country over the last few years, and we will continue to be actively involved as the plan is rolled out over the next few years. As Ms. Fiska said, the work really now begins. And of course, we've been extremely fortunate in having the support and cooperation of other UN agencies, primarily UNIFEM, now UN Women. UNFPA adopts multi-sectoral, holistic approaches to address women, peace and security issues, to combat various forms of violence and in establishment of systems for coordination of response efforts. Furthermore, UNFPA stresses the impact of war and conflict on women and recognizes the need to foster leadership capabilities of women to contribute to conflict prevention as well as conflict resolution and sustainable peace efforts. Our program activities under Security Council Resolution 1325 and 1820, as well as the other three related resolutions, therefore take place in both humanitarian, post-conflict and development settings. And they are covered under the themes of prevention, protection, participation, data collection and analysis, and development of institutional capacities. I'd also like to say that we've been involved in assisting in the development of such plans in Uganda, Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire as well. UNFPA will continue to expand its partnership with the government of Nepal to realize the goals as stated under the plan. Our contributions in this area form a major element of our role within the UN system in line with our commitment to achieving the MDGs, the ICPD, the International Conference on Population and Development, and the Beijing Conference goals, and of course various international human rights instruments. Again, let me take this opportunity to congratulate the government and the people of Nepal for this momentous achievement. We thank you for this honor and the opportunity to partner with you, and we look forward to the implementation of this plan. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of UN Women, it is my great pleasure to be here today to participate in the launch of Nepal's National Action Plan on the United Nations Security Council Resolutions 1325 and 1820 on women, peace and security. I would like to congratulate Nepal for their extraordinary work over the last 2 years, from investing in a deeply consultative process which has been shown here, to ensure that women's voices shaped the action plan, to showing vision and leadership in setting up a high-level steering committee to facilitate implementation. It has been a privilege to be a part of the Peace Support Working Group and to partner with you. The number of resolutions adopted since 2008 on this subject show an exceptional degree of commitment by the Security Council to build accountability for the women, peace and security agenda. As Nepal is now in a post-conflict transition phase, these resolutions hold great significance in addressing issues on peace and security from a gender perspective. It is also contextual to Nepal, as it is one of the significant troops contributing country to UN peacekeeping missions. The creation of the government's high-level steering committee in 2009 is a milestone in this regard. UN Women has had the privilege of engaging with the Ministry of Peace and Reconstruction through an agreement since November 2007. Since then, UN Women has been working closely with the Ministry for enhancing understanding of the resolutions, realization for effective implementation, conducting training and preparing a broad framework for the preparation of the NAP. Subsequently, through the PSWG, we stand ready to support the government in the implementation of NAP. The NAP has created an opportunity for all stakeholders to translate their commitment into action through strengthening their coordination and collaboration in its implementation. And UN Women stands committed in this endeavor. With sustained political will in implementation of NAP, the quality of life of women on the ground can change. We hope that the Nepal NAP inspires the region and moves from being a very good practice on process to an extremely process on comprehensive implementation. Thank you. They're mobilized as well. And in very close cooperation with Nepal, Sri Lanka and India, we will work on widowhood. And of course, the civil society, the NGOs will be important implementation partners as well. So I think we have already started, and we have had some, should I say, thoughts before this launch of the plan to following up. And that will be done in close cooperation with, of course, the governments.
In regard to the widowhood question, I think I should mention here that the Single Women's Group has been one of the most important constituency in the entire process. They have been involved in all the consultations, in designing the consultations, and it's not that we have a separate program for single women within the National Action Plan, but the concerns that were presented during the consultations have been reflected in the National Action Plan. And one of the most striking their concern was, while defining compensation for single women, there should be no age bar limit. That was one of their concerns, and I think that's been reflected in the National Action Plan as well. And in terms of other rehabilitation, other programs, it's a holistic program with a special concern accorded to single women. So I think that's what I need to say. I would like to thank Bangladesh for stressing on the importance of respect, tolerance and diversity. I think we have tried to maintain that in the National Action Plan as well, and we hope to see perhaps Bangladesh be the second in South Asia to have a National Action Plan as well. And we are there to support you, sir. That's what I wanted to say. Here that when we started, it was, the timeline, it almost seemed an impossible task. If you look at the information booklet that is there behind, you look at the timeline at the back page, we started, our first initial meeting took place for drafting the National Action Plan on 31st March 2010. The NAP was adopted on 1st February, so that's exactly 10 months. And during these 10 months, we've been able to accomplish all these. And when we were developing in March the framework for the National Action Plan, the background material was the indicators that the special working group had just developed. So we took a lot of input from that also, from the UN's, what is it called? The indicators for tracking the implementation of 1325. So, but we initially had 4 pillars, and I must say that during the consultations, it was the participants, the different stakeholders who came up with this very important pillar, monitoring and evaluation and resource mobilization, which would be a cross-cutting pillar for all the other 4 pillars, because without that, the implementation would be very poor. So I think there are clear indicators in terms of the 5 pillars and specific actions. And as we said, this helps. We felt one of the most important thing of having these indicators is to strengthen accountability. So without those indicators, we would not have been able to do that. And the NGOs committing to come up with a monitoring report is not to challenge the government, but to support and work with the government to strengthen the accountability, because we have been selling dreams in a way. When we were consulting the communities at the community level, the women and children and girls directly affected by conflict, at one times we felt very scared also. What are we doing? Are we able to really fulfill their wishes? Are we really able to implement all these things? So those have been major concerns for us. That is why I think the indicators is a very, very important component of the National Action Plan, and the NGOs commit to come up with monitoring reports with specific statistics. Like, for example, if we say we are going to increase women's participation in the security sector, how many in the first year have been recruited? So those kinds of indicators will help to keep watch on the implementation stage and also strengthen accountability. So that's what we plan to do at the moment, though we may need to have a more strategic planning, and we count on organizations like yours to guide us in developing this strategy as well. I think, about the women's representation in politics, perhaps I will ask the Joint Secretary or the Secretary to respond.
Your Excellency, the peace process in the first phase, and we are moving towards on the second phase of the peace process. And the constitution, the Constituent Assembly is on the process of writing a new constitution. There is some provision of ensuring participation of women in the peace process and the rule of law, and making the ensuring the implementation phase of the peace process. And there is some provision in the interim constitution of 33% participation in the legislative parliament. So I think there is very strong recommendation of National Plan of Action to meaningful participation in every level of the governance of the state. Thank you very much.
And the evolution afterwards. You see that I think we are one of the very few countries where we have a very strong participation of women in the national legislature. I think we are 13th or 14th around the world. And it is not only that, I think our national legislature today not only has a representation from women, but it is most representative in terms of the geography, in terms of the marginalized groups, in terms of the various ethnic groups that are there in Nepal. So I think when we write a constitution, which is a single most important document to really guide the nation towards the future, it is very important that we have the voice of everyone heard. It is with that view in mind that we have had the most representative Constituent Assembly today. Now that's why I think, as the Secretary just explained, I must also say that one of the positive factors of the post-conflict situation in Nepal has been the assertion of the power and the expectations and the aspirations of all the marginalized groups and the women in Nepal. And we see a lot of change there. The women are very active at the local level, women are active at the district level. They are very active at really transforming the society overall in Nepal. I think it is in that perspective, I'm sure, that this National Plan of Action has also been very, very broad and very, very, I should say, comprehensive. But I would also like to stress that on the final point, which is on the 5th, I think the resource mobilization, monitoring and implementation are key really to the National Plan of Action. Though it is the 5th point, I would say that is the key point. And one of the reports that has, one of the points which have been stressed very strongly there is the relationship between the resources. When we say resources, of course, domestic resource mobilization is equally important. We will do that. But given the situation that we are in, I think the resource generation from the international community and then the capacity building, I think these two things are really critical if we are talking about implementing the National Action Plan at the national level. And when I say that, especially at the district level, at the local level, the capacity enhancement and the involvement of the real stakeholders, not only those who only take issue forward, but those who are directly affected by the conflict, will be taken forward. I think there is a commitment there in the National Plan of Action, and I'm sure that that will be also taken into account by the international community when the National Plan of Action is looked at. And we know that the Secretary General has come out with a very extensive, comprehensive set of indicators. In fact, there is 26, but then if you add, I think the one or two, the breakdown subdivision, then it would be even 31, 32. So we can see that this has really helped even preparation of our own National Action Plan, and we are trying to take it in a holistic manner for both the prevention side, to the promotion side, to the protection side in a seamless manner. And it is only taking them all together from all perspectives. We do hope that we'll move on to the next phase. Conflict was a very difficult situation for Nepal, but we do hope that after conflict, we'll make good progress in all these areas that we have made. Any more comments from the floor? Always define young in many different ways. You can say young in spirit and young in age, and you can be very young and you can just moderately young and really young. But what I would like to stress, but of course, jokes apart, but what I would like to really stress that I think this is precisely what we are trying to grapple with in Nepal. We have a very large young population in Nepal, and because we are still in the transition of the peace process, therefore the stability is still a major issue in the country. We are working very hard towards the completion of the writing of the Constitution as early as possible, so that it will move us to the next stage, which means which will ensure political stability, which will ensure the rights of the minorities, not only the minorities but the expectations of the people who are in the minority, or who are geographically disadvantaged, or who are ethnically marginalized. So once we have this political stability firmly ingrained with the writing of the completion of the writing of the new constitution, definitely the government and the entire society of the country will move towards the rapid growth and development, and that will definitely take care of the youth as well as the not so youth people. But we are aware that the migration is a major issue. Migration, I will not only take migration in a negative term, but when there's a large number of people moving out, that is a matter of some concern to all of us. But again, we live in a globalized world. So if people migrate, for 1 or 2, 4, 5, 6 years, and they come back again and they can even contribute. So we can always look at as a circulation, brain drain for a while, but maybe brain gain later on, with more experience and more vision from the outside world as well. But I think why we are really stressing on the quick transition to the normal phase is again for precisely the same reason that we have said, that we would like to really accelerate the economic development. But why we are also stressing on this sustainable piece is that if we have only stability and no development, that stability will not be sustainable. But again, if we are only development and no stability and no inclusiveness in the government, that will not again be sustainable. So we have to look at the political process to be inclusive, the development to be sustainable, and development to be inclusive as well. So we are fully aware of that. The other points, I think I would just say that yes, we are very happy to have so many congratulatory the comments coming from the floor, but we say that it is only half done. As we said, we have just started it. Maybe you please wait a little while and lend us full congratulations when we really implement it next year, 3-4 years from now onwards. And again, on the single women issue and the issues related to the inclusion of the sexual violence and all that, I think we have included that precisely because we feel very strongly about it, and precisely because there is a general awareness about the issues related to single women. It is again because of the result of the conflict. That's why there is a reason behind it, and there are specific provisions here. And when we say the participation of the women and the promotion of women and the marginalized women, naturally, when we have a district committees, we have the local committees, it is naturally the responsibility of all these committees to make their programs, their activities as inclusive as possible. When I say inclusive in terms of even the women, that is also marginalized, that is also geographically disadvantaged, and also ethnically marginalized. So it will, when it is implemented, that at the local level will take care of that, and I'm sure that when we have this monitoring and all that in place, it will ensure what type of the activities are really implemented on the ground. Once again, I would like to give the floor to Vandana Rana.
Just a few things. So one, yes, we are very proud to say that our comprehensive peace agreement addresses gender-based violence and sexual violence. But at the same time, we have lots of challenge. Just addressing it in the comprehensive peace agreement does not serve the purpose. Data collection is a big challenge in terms of sexual violence. We do not have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as yet, but we are expecting that also, which might enhance the problem, which might give some solution to the problem. But we really look forward to the external development partners supporting organizations in terms of data collection for sexual violence. That is a big challenge, I must say. So that's one thing. The other thing about the youth, I just wanted to say that yes, in Nepal, above 40 or even 60s, almost 70s are called youth leaders. That's the political leaders. They are called the youth leaders. So I think that's where the trend comes from, that in Nepal we have people above secretaries who also attended those consultations will agree on that almost 30 to 40% of the people who attended these consultations were young people, young girls. And in addition to that, we had 6 separate special discussions with girl children. So we have tried our best to include the perspectives of the youth in this National Action Plan, and I feel that they will be very important partners in the implementation as well. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to say a few words? Madam.
Yes, I'd just like to make a more general comment on the issue of what we call, in UN language at least, implementation, or why not real change on the ground, because this is what we would like to see, not only in Nepal but also in a lot of other countries that are now either have launched a national action plan on women, peace and security, or are in the process of making such an action plan. And Nepal is really leading the way here internationally and first and foremost in the South Asia region. But what does it take to see that real change on the ground? Of course, you could see, you could look at all the challenges, all the things that kind of makes it impossible to imagine that you would really see such changes, specifically when you are in a situation of conflict or post-conflict, as is in the case of Nepal. But of course, this is the whole point with the way of thinking behind these Security Council resolutions on women, peace and security, that post-conflict times is also times of opportunities. It's times of rebuilding a society. It is really exciting times times for opportunities, as we could see in the North Africa and Middle East at this moment. Such huge turnovers or changes in society also creates an opportunity to, in this case, for women to really participate and have their voice heard in how shall we shape our common future in a society. So my vision is that instead of thinking, as has all too often been done, that gender equality is something that we can talk about later. First, we have to see this and this happen, and then we can talk about gender equality. I would say it's never too early for gender equality. It's never too early for democracy, really. And in times of post-conflict, it's really a time for opportunities to make profound changes happen. And this is, of course, what we all would like to see in Nepal and a lot of other countries as well.